Well, good morning, everybody. Great to see you. My name's Evan. If we've never met before, I'm the campus pastor here at Restore. Grateful that you've taken the time out of your Sunday morning to be here with us. Like Talon said, hope next week you can come to our Serve Day. It's going to be a ton of fun, making this building look great for Easter. And then also hope you can come to the potluck. Be sure to sign up for those. We also have QR codes out in the lobby. If you missed those behind me, you can sign up out there. Sign up for one of them. We need all the help we can get. And on the Palm Sunday potluck right now, we only have one sign up for chicken salad. So it's going to be like 100 of us just here's your one romaine lettuce piece or whatever. I was recently reading a book, or have been reading it, by the Korean-German philosopher Byung-Chul Han. It's a new book that came out recently. It's called In Praise of the Earth. It's about just kind of his reflections, gardening in his secret garden in Berlin. It's in his backyard that he lives in. And in that book, I encountered a poem that I was really moved by this week. It's by the French singer-songwriter Jorge Moustaki. I'm sure we all know him. I was listening to him on my drive-in, so that's my favorite Jorge song right there. Just a banger. But the poem is entitled "There Was Once a Garden." And it really captures this environmental nostalgia, this longing for a world that many of us who've been born into an era of blue screens and algorithms, fluorescence, and factories have never actually seen. So let me read it for you. It's a song for the children who are born and who live between steel and bitumen, between concrete and asphalt, and who will perhaps never know that the earth was a garden. There was a garden called the earth. It shone in the sun like forbidden fruit. No, it wasn't heaven or hell nor anything already seen or heard. There was a garden, a house made of trees, with a bed of moss to make love in, and a little rolling stream without a wave came to refresh it and continued its course. There was a garden as big as a valley. We could eat there in all seasons, on the burning earth or on the frozen grass, and discover flowers that had no name. There was a garden called the earth. It was big enough for thousands of children. It was once inhabited by our grandfathers who themselves got it from their grandparents. Where is this garden where we could have been born, where we could have lived carefree? Where is this house with all the doors open that I'm still looking for but can't find anymore? I love that poem and the feeling it evokes, and I think it's significant in this that Moustaki calls this garden a house. Where is this house? And that word does a lot of the emotional work of the poem. Where's this house? That means he's not describing some distant wilderness or some scenic overlook that we could visit on the weekends. He's describing this place that all of us are made to live in. A place of open doors and beds of mosses. And the poem is communicating that it's this quiet tragedy of the modern condition to live in a world of steel. He uses that word, live, but while being made for a home of trees. We live in a world of steel, but we are made for a home of trees, a house that is a garden. The poem, it brings in this feeling of melancholy and nostalgia. That this garden place was supposed to be passed down from our grandparents, yet instead it's mythical. It's this distant dream. We're looking for a home we've never stepped foot in, driven by this memory that we've never witnessed. And we feel the draft from those open doors, and we can even maybe catch a whiff of the flora and fauna that grow in that distant country, but nevertheless, we can't follow the wind's path to the source. We're locked out of this garden that we were made for. Now, I share that poem with just a tiny bit of commentary on it because I think it captures something of the emotional world that we find in the prophet Ezekiel. This is a man who knows all about lost houses and paved over dreams. When we open the pages of his book, he and the people of God are living in exile. They're far from Jerusalem. They're far from the temple. They are far from the place that Israel believes to be the dwelling place of the divine. They are not living in their home. In many ways, exile feels like the world Moustaki is describing. A people who once lived in a land of vineyards and olive trees now find themselves in the machinery of empire. The temple's been ransacked. The songs of Zion have been replaced by the babbling tongues of a foreign city. And the memories of home have taken on this strange quality that memories often do in exile, starting to feel more like a myth than a history. like fictional stories your grandparents told you about a place that may or may not still exist and that you may or may not ever see. Where is this house with all the doors open that I'm still looking for, but can't find anymore? Ezekiel, he was among the first wave of these exiles after Babylon came and ransacked Israel and then took a group of people away from the promised land into Babylon, and Ezekiel's with them. And Ezekiel's particular genius in voice in the biblical canon was to speak prophetic visions into the setting of exile, doing something not unlike that poem is doing, saying there is a home that we were made for that's nothing like the home that we are living in right now. We are made for a garden city that's not like the machinery of Babylon. And he communicates that vision through a series of strange dreams that are given to him by the Ancient of Days. But the one I want to explore today has everything to do with a river that flows out from the temple. That sounds a little bit like that stream that Wasaki describes that waters the bed of moss continually. Here in this passage, Ezekiel, he catches this faint whiff of the open door. And he's telling the exiles that the garden's not gone. That even in the barren world, there is a river capable of making the desert bloom. And we find that vision unfolding in Ezekiel 47 in our teaching text that we will be in for week 2 of our series, The River Wild. In this series, we're discovering that in the biblical imagination, a river is never just like a line on a map or just like a throwaway line of geography. It's almost always a sacred threshold. It's this stage where God meets his people to carry them toward a new horizon. So in this series, we're uncovering the good news that a few rolling streams held for the ancient readers and that they still offer us to us today as we navigate our world of concrete and asphalt. And so last week we explored the river that flows in the Garden of Eden, and today we will look at the river from Ezekiel and see the good news that God has for us in this story. Now the vision of this river in chapter 47 doesn't appear out of nowhere. So a little bit of context. These verses come at the long end of this guided tour that Ezekiel is on that began back in chapter 40. In this vision, Ezekiel in chapter 40 is carried by the Spirit up to a high mountain in the land of Israel, where he is met by an angelic figure, a man whose appearance was like bronze, an appearance very much like my own, potentially. I know that's what you were thinking. Well, that sounds like a lot like Evan, actually. Just kidding, I'm going for the more John the Baptist vibe right now. Beard in the wilderness, long hair, eating locusts or whatever. And so he's met by this man, and this angel is, when he sees him, he is holding a measuring rod and a line in his hand. This is basically the equivalent of, imagine like getting carried by the Spirit of God in a vision up to the high mountain, and you're introduced to an angel, and out of his 2 back pockets, he pulls a tape measurer and a pencil. And he's like, come with me. And you're like, oh, all right, here I go. And so for several chapters, this angel is walking Ezekiel through a vast temple complex and just kind of measuring stuff out. He's like, look at this right here, this altar. 10 inches. He's like, write that down. So he goes, all right, I'll write that down. And so that's just been happening. But then in chapter 43, something extraordinary happens. The glory of God, the same glory that earlier in Ezekiel, we are told has departed from the temple, all of a sudden returns and fills it again, finally. And so by the end, by the time we reach chapter 47, Ezekiel has walked the temple corridors. He's seen the glory of God finally return here and dwell here. That has let him know that exile is not final. That even though the Babylonians destroyed the temple, it will one day be rebuilt and restored, and the presence of God will dwell there. And then the guide brings him to the entrance of this temple after seeing this, where something unexpected begins to happen. So picking up in our teaching text, the man brought me to the entrance to the temple, and I saw water coming out from under the threshold of the temple toward the east, for the temple faced east. So the presence descends, brings Ezekiel back to the entrance, and now it's like water is leaking out from under the threshold. Now, as we discovered last week, in the biblical world, water is a shorthand or a symbol for life. To a desert people, a world without water wasn't inconvenient. It's a graveyard. It's a world that is destined for death, much like it would be for us if we lost access to fresh water. But the biblical writers are writing much further earlier than like modern plumbing. And so it was like, if it didn't rain, you're kind of doomed. If there was a drought, it's like a lot of people are going to die. And so a world without water, a world without a river, a source of fresh drinking water and rain, was a world destined for death. So when Ezekiel is seeing this flow out of the temple, he's not seeing a plumbing anomaly in the temple. He is seeing the very vitality, life of God leaking into a dying world now that God's presence has returned to that temple. It's like the life force of the Creator is refusing to stay bottled up in that building. It is the life of the infinite overflowing into this world, and in particular into the eastern regions of it. It's like you can picture the temple, the presence of God has returned there, and you can imagine it like it's like a balloon that has been filled and filled and filled and filled with water to the point where now it's like starting to leak out from under the temple doors. It's just overflowing. And why is it doing that? Because the God who dwells there is the God who is always overflowing his life and love into what is not God. God is Father, Son, and Spirit. He's a community of love, but that is a community that is not enclosed on itself, but that is always overflowing out into our world. And so here he sees that water, that life flowing into the world and flowing to the east. And that direction probably doesn't mean much to us at first glance, but in the geography of ancient Israel, east was not the direction you would have expected a river to go. East is where the land begins to dry. East is the direction where the green hills give way to the harsh desert and eventually the barren basin of the Dead Sea. More on that in a bit. The sun rises in the east and opens its great hot eye on that landscape. And so if any water was flowing in that direction, you could expect it to just evaporate in a day's time. And yet, in this vision, that's where the water's flowing. It's not running toward the lush places. It doesn't flow toward the Mediterranean or the fertile valleys. East, toward the dry ground, toward the scorched earth, toward the places that need water, and more importantly, the life the water symbolizes the most. And then Ezekiel notices that this water was coming down from under the south side of the temple, south of the altar. Now, we aren't told this explicitly, that the water is flowing from the altar itself, but Ezekiel gives us a hint in that final detail that it might be. The stream slips out from the temple precinct right beside the place of sacrifice. In the imagination of Israel, the altar, that's the place where life is offered up to God, where blood is poured out, where atonement is made for sin, and here, right next to that place, life-giving water is flowing. Ezekiel would not have known the full meaning of what he is seeing, but those of us who read these words on the other side of the cross and the pouring out of the Spirit, we read them with what the Apostle Paul calls the mystery that was kept hidden for ages and generations, but is now revealed. In the epistle to Colossians, he says that great mystery of the scriptures that was hidden, but now is revealed, is Christ. That Christ is the seed buried in the field of the Hebrew scriptures. And when we receive the Spirit, we can go back to those texts, dig our hands into the fertile soil and pluck that seed out. We can see Christ all over its pages. This is what happens to those disillusioned disciples on the road to Emmaus, where Jesus says, after the resurrection, in beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained to them what was said in all of the scriptures concerning himself. So scripture is not just this like narrative that you read cover to cover, where you have these different scenes that happen. It is also something that has its climax at the center in the crucifixion of Jesus, and that informs everything you read back and everything you read forward. So if you were ever to come to me and you were saying, hey, where should I start? I'm new to the Bible. Where should I start to understand it? I would not say start in Genesis, because as a Christian, we don't read the Bible just from like Genesis to the Gospels to then the New Testament. As Christians, we read the Gospels like that. Everything is concerning Christ, so start with Christ. You read the Gospels, and then that becomes the lens by which you read everything that comes before and everything that comes after. It is all about him. And it's not just about him. Mysteriously, and this is hidden for ages, but now with the power of the Christ, we also know it's not just concerning Christ, it's also, he's in it. He's in these pages. We can find him. So when we stand here with Ezekiel and we're watching this water go south of the altar, we cannot help as Christians but think of this other moment where life is poured out beside an altar of sacrifice. As we said last week, in the Gospel of John, we are told that when Jesus hung on the cross, the wooden altar that all altars point toward, a soldier pierces his side and outflows blood and water. So read in the light of the cross, then this river flowing from the altar begins to sound a whole lot like that river flowing from that altar. And maybe mysteriously, they're the same moment somehow. The water was coming down from under the south side of the temple, south of the altar. A soldier pierced the side of the crucified Christ and outflowed blood and water. The river that Ezekiel sees flowing from the south of the altar to the desolate desert, it's a hint, it's a preview, it's a type of the life of Christ that will be poured out into the world from the cross. The reality that it's pointing toward, bearing witness to. So Ezekiel sees this, but he isn't just told, stand here and look at this. No, this angel figure invites him to follow the flow of this water to see what happens in these eastern regions it's moving toward. So he then brought me out through the north gate and led me around outside to the outer gate facing east, and the water was trickling from the south side. As the man went eastward, now notice that detail. Eastward means they are moving away from the source of where the water is coming from. So they move away from it, and with a measuring line in his hand, he measures off 1,000 cubits. Then he led me through water that was ankle deep. He measured off another 1,000 cubits and led me through water that was knee deep. He measured off another 1,000 cubits and led me through water that was up to my waist. And then he measured off another 1,000, but now it was a river that I could not cross because the water had risen and was deep enough to swim in, a river that no one could cross. What Ezekiel sees here is remarkable. Did you see it? So he's led step by step through this river at the precise interval of 1,000 cubits. That's roughly 1,500 feet. First, the water's ankle deep, knee deep, waist deep, and finally it's too deep to cross. And do you notice what's odd about that whole description? First, that there's no tributaries joining the river. Normally, rivers only grow like that when other streams are feeding into them. But this river is miraculously growing with no other river feeding it, and it's growing as it's moving away from its source. Imagine standing at an ocean, the edge of an ocean, and there's like a valley that's been formed that the water could flow through. And somehow, for some mysterious reason, the great ocean is only flowing from a trickle. And you're like, that's weird. And you decide to follow it to see where that stream leads. And as you walk it, this trickle, you notice that somehow it's growing as you move away from the ocean, even though there's no other rivers pouring into it. And you keep following it 4,000 feet away, and all of a sudden, it's this massive river that is wide and deep that you can only swim through. That's what Ezekiel is witnessing. It's the life pouring forth from God. The river is growing, not because something else is contributing to it, but because the source is inexhaustible. And that life that flows from God, from the place of sacrifice, south of the altar, from the cross, it's not diminishing as it's leaving its origin. It's multiplying, it's overflowing, and eventually it's transforming everything in its path. And Ezekiel is experiencing this a progressive immersion into it, which I think poses a great question for us as readers. Just what to ask ourselves, what depth are we standing in the life of God? Some of us are standing in the river of God and we're just ankle deep. We've stepped into that stream, we've felt the initial cool of grace, but our feet have remained firmly planted on the solid ground of our own control. Faith at this level, it's like casual acquaintance. It looks like praying only when your life forces you to, or showing kindness only when it's convenient. It's a life of friendly love, but that knows nothing of enemy love. It's this safe, manageable, like a Sunday morning splash in the water, followed by a Monday through Saturday picnic on the banks of the river. In the shallows, we're always sort of one step away from the dry shore. We are ready to retreat the moment the tide rises or the current nudges us off balance. We might catch a glimmer of that house with all the doors open, further up and further in, and we know that's the home that we're made for, but we hesitate at the edge here, wondering if we're truly ready for that beautiful, drowning risk it would take to get there. Others of us, though, we've like hiked up our pants a little higher and we've waded out until the water reaches our knees. And here you're beginning to feel that persistent tug of the current. You feel the weight of a God who's asking for more than just your spare time. Your faith is starting to show up in hard conversations you used to avoid, in truth telling that stings but is still required. Yet, even as the river pulls at you, you are still holding so much safely above the surface. Maybe you've hiked up your pants, or maybe you're brave enough you even got your jeans wet, but still there's much above you are refusing to put in the water. Your finances, your family, your carefully guarded traumas. You're still standing on your own 2 feet. Maybe now you're curling your toes on a moss-covered rock, trying to hold on for dear life because you're just uncertain if these gentle rapids will be enough to take your weight. And then there's those of us who are waist deep. At this depth, the river is reshaping a lot. Your schedule, your relationships, your desires. You can no longer touch the bottom with ease, and you can't move without feeling the immense power of the Spirit pushing against your back. The river is carrying you, but your hair is still dry. You're still leaning against the flow a bit. You're maybe clutching one last remnant of a branch that's attached to the shore. You're refusing to be baptized, even though you know that's what God is asking you to do. Or you're unwilling to let go of this addictive behavior that's kept you safe and sane for so long. Like you have this well of pain within you. And this drink, this drug, this website has been the one thing that keeps you from feeling like that is just overtaking you. That this is keeping me safe. And God is saying, well, what would it look like if you let that go? And you just let the pain do a little bit of the work it needs to do in you so that you can be healed. Actually feeling the feelings that up until this moment you have been pushing away. We see this hesitation in the story of the rich young ruler. Here's a man who has waded into the life of God. He knows the commandments. He has lived a moral life. But when the great rabbi challenges him to let go of the last branch, his wealth, his security, the one thing tethering him to the dry land, he can't do it. He walks away sorrowful because he was willing to wade in the river, but he was not willing to swim in it. And so finally there's swimming. This is giving up being the navigator entirely. Your feet leave the silt and the stones, the bottom drops away. You're fully immersed in the river, it becomes your world, carrying you toward that garden that's as big as a valley. This is complete faith. It is utter trust in the eternal God, living into your baptism, giving God nothing short of everything, your ambitions, your fears, your very life and death. This is the river Waldo Jesus describes to Peter in John's gospel. Very truly, I tell you, when you were younger, you dressed yourself and went where you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands and someone else will dress you and lead you where you do not want to go. In the shallows, we dress ourselves. We pick our paths. We maintain the fragile illusion of control. We hold on to our wealth, our security. But to stretch out your hands in the river of God is to allow the Holy Spirit to be this someone else who carries you. It's a transition from a self-directed life, where it's like my way, to a life of being led. It's this terrifying and exhilarating moment where you stop resisting the push of the current and you start floating. You let the river sweep up your legs and carry you. Here's how the spiritual director Gerald May puts it. The gentlest form of spiritual narcissism is the idea that one can accomplish one's own spiritual growth. I can do it. Eventually, willfulness must give way to willingness and surrender, and mastery must yield to mystery. Many of us were standing in the shallows of a God who wants to drown us in his love. We're playing in the puddles of a threshold when there is an ocean-sized river just a few thousand cubits away. And the invitation is always the same: to take the next step, to step deeper, to go in up to your waist and see what happens. Maybe just to put your head under for a moment, to uncurl your toes and let go of the bottom, to just trust the current. Allow God's life to carry you beyond your comfort into that river that never runs dry, the river that transforms everything that it touches, the river that flows from the altar, from Christ's side. And this is what Ezekiel sees. And I love this. He stops him. This angel shows Ezekiel all this, and he just kind of stops him to make sure he's like paying attention. He asks me, "Son of man, do you see this?" And I imagine Ezekiel's like, "Yeah, duh. What else was I supposed to be looking at?" Do you see this? And then he led me back to the bank of the river. So they get to this part of the river. It's too deep to cross. You'd have to swim in it. And maybe because Ezekiel can't swim or something, the angel leads him back to the bank. And when he arrives there, he sees a great number of trees on each side. He says to me, "This water flows toward the eastern regions and goes down into the Arabah, where it enters the Dead Sea. When it enters into the sea, the salty water there becomes fresh." So the vision starts to conclude with what can only be described here as a biological impossibility, the transformation of the Dead Sea. In the ancient world, as in ours, the Dead Sea is the ultimate no man's land. Sits at the lowest point on earth. It is a basin of extremity. It is roughly 10 times saltier than the ocean. In this picture, those little mounds that you're seeing are like beds of salt. It's a body where life hits a wall. Nothing can swim here. Nothing grows here. There's no birds crying over it because there's no food in it. It's as lifeless as Venus. It's stagnant, heavy chemical soup. It's so salty you could literally take a nap on it because you'll just float on its surface. It's so dense. And so in the biblical imagination, the Dead Sea, that's the ultimate symbol of death. And here, Ezekiel is watching as this river wild crashes into its basins. In verse 8, it says the toxic waters become fresh. The Hebrew word there is actually rapha, means healed. The waters are healed. And when this happens, this ecosystem transforms. Swarms of living creatures will live wherever the river flows. There will be large numbers of fish because this water flows there and makes the salt water fresh. So where the river flows, everything will live. The swarms of living creatures. This is a picture of extravagant diversity. It's not just a few hardy species that manage to survive the salt. It's the river has brought this explosion of life that is so thick and so varied. It supports an entire community. And this is why Ezekiel then sees something that would have been a hallucination to any local: fishermen. Fishermen will stand along the shore from En-Gedi to En-Glaim. There will be places for spreading nets. The fish will be of many kinds, like the fish of the Mediterranean Sea. So people aren't just passing by, they're setting up shop. They're spreading their nets. They're building a life and a livelihood on the shores of what used to be a graveyard. Verse 11, but the swamps and the marshes will not become fresh. They will be left for salt. A nice little aside here, but it's the wisdom of the biblical authors who know a little bit of salt is actually a good thing. You don't want like a fully saltless Dead Sea. That would not be that helpful. Salt is somewhat helpful for ecosystems, so you need a little bit of it. In verse 12, fruit trees of all kinds will grow on the banks of the river. Their trees will not wither, nor their fruit fail. Every month they will bear fruit, because the water from the sanctuary flows to them. So there's no off season. It's eternal spring. And then Ezekiel gives us that final detail. Their fruit will serve for food, and their leaves for healing. So it began as this humble trickle beneath the temple sill. It has ripened into a teeming landscape in the far east, where life is just flourishing. Cathedral of trees cloister the riverbank. They offer up a harvest of fruit you can pick and sink your teeth right into. Their leaves are a balm for the sick. It's like herbal medicine. Don't tell your aunt that's in there. So it's hard here not to hear in this passage, like the echo of that older story from the Garden of Eden. And it uses so much of the same language here to call back to that. Humanity begins in a place just like this. Here it is, paradise being recreated again. But here's what's interesting. When you take this text, you put it on in conversation with that text from Genesis, you find an interesting difference, though. When the humans are exiled in Genesis, where are they sent? They're sent east of Eden, out into the dry places, out into the desert. And after that, if you read through the biblical narrative, the garden doesn't go away. They build the temple. There's the Holy of Holies. The garden becomes this place that you can go to, but it's a place that you must enter. It's a life that you have to seek under proper conditions. And so for much of the biblical story, that's how holiness works. If you want to encounter the life of God, you want to drink from the river of life, you can't just twiddle your fingers and wait for it to appear at your doorstep. You come to the temple after you purify yourself. You pass through the waters, you enter the holy space, and you draw near to the life of water, and then you leave. And if you want to come back, you can. But the initiative belongs to you, the seeker. But that is not what Ezekiel sees. In Ezekiel's vision, the life of God isn't waiting for people to make their way to the temple. The river is moving outward. It's flowing into the desert, into the wasteland. The river of God is not waiting for your return. It's rushing out to meet you no matter how far east you are. This is not man in search of God, but God in search of man. Or to keep with the image from our poem, this is not a house with all the doors open that I'm looking for but can't find. This is a home that has broken its own boundaries. This is a garden that has flooded the asphalt, a threshold that has turned into a river to bring a home to a homeless heart. Which sounds a whole lot like the life of Jesus. Again and again, that Galilean druid is moving toward the barren places. He's moving toward sickness and toward shame and toward death and toward failure. He touches people who he was told were too unclean or too broken, too far east to taste the refreshing river of God. And when he does this, instead of their uncleanliness spreading to him, their barrenness infecting him, his holy life spreads to them. At his touch, leprous skin, once white and peeling with decay, is rejuvenated into a supple and healthy brown. At his word, eyes that are filmed over with the gray fog of blindness blink slowly, squinting as they adjust to the gold of light. And at his command, the possessed, once writhing under the jagged influence of dark forces, return to this rhythmic stillness where their fractured spirits mended back into harmony. Ezekiel has seen the miracle of the gospel in one image. If the Dead Sea, the most desolate, salt-choked, life-denying place on the planet, can be resuscitated, then there is no part of our world and your human experience that can't be too. What happened there can happen here. So what is the Dead Sea in your life? What's the part of your story that's lifeless, that's barren? Is it a secret hurt or a long-held habit that's sat in the scorching sun for so long it's evaporated every drop of tenderness, leaving behind only a brine of resentment? Is it a relationship that's turned so salty and bitter that you've given up on anything ever growing there again? Is it a grief? Feels like a desert basin where nothing will grow? Or is it a despair that comes from watching the suffering of our world, families that are torn apart by war, communities living in fear, rising prices, children who can't imagine safety, places so parched that hope for a future seems impossible to plant? Where is this house with all the doors open that I'm looking for but can't find anymore? Ezekiel answers that question from the poem and the question that we ask. And he says, it's here. It's here in this river that flows forever from the altar of the temple, from the side of Christ hanging on the cross, who turns the Dead Sea of the cross into a miracle of life. As Psalm 46 says it, there is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy place where the Most High dwells. And when we dive into that current, we finally will find that house with all the doors open, that garden, that river whose stream makes glad the city of God. This house, this garden, is not just a memory of our grandfathers or a myth from a distant country. It is a reality that is rushing toward us, toward you. And all you have to do to receive that river is let go. Surrender your barrenness to the wild river of God. Move from willfulness to willingness. To take the next step of surrender, duck your head under, be baptized, let the water sweep up your legs so that everything, even the part of you that is most dead, will live. And who knows? Maybe when you do this, what you will find is those places of death will miraculously grow flowers that have no name, and fruit for food, and leaves that will serve for healing. Let's pray together.